We just got the Mandalorian Season 3 official trailer and we need to break it down, so let's get straight into it.
Our people are scattered, like stars in the galaxy. What are we? What do we stand for?
We kick off the trailer by watching a group of Mandalorians walking in the distance, and in the next shot we can see a few distinctive outlines, namely the outline of Pax Viszla, the Mandalorian who initially challenged Mando for the Darksaber back in the book of Boba Fett. Then close by we see Din Djarin himself with his iconic silver armor, and right in front of him leading the pack is a female Mandalorian. It's quite hard to see the color of the Mandalorian standing in front, but we can deduce the visor shape that it could very well be Bo Katan or one of the two female Mandalorians we see in a later shot. And counting the number of Mandalorians there are in this party, we find that there are 7 in total, perhaps evoking the visual image of the 7 Samurai, another classic Akira Kurosawa film that has since been a huge inspiration for Star Wars. We then get more close-up shots of more Mandalorians, but while these Mandalorians could have been part of the 7 we saw earlier, there appears to be way more than 7 even when you disclude Pax Viszla. The Mandalorians that we see here are dressed in odd colors, not really in a uniform color scheme, and this is likely due to the fact that many probably had to scavenge or inherit different parts of armor from various sources. Given how Beskar was so rare during this time, and with the Mandalorians constantly on the run, it's really no surprise as to why. But pay attention to the background of these scenes as it will become pretty important later on.
Being a Mandalorian's not just learning about how to fight. You also have to know how to navigate the galaxy. That way, you'll never be lost. I'm going to Mandalore, so that I may be forgiven for my transgressions.
Mando flies in his new ship with Grogu, and we get some Mandalorian lessons narrated by Mando, and these lessons are likely directed towards Grogu, who has since decided to choose the path of the Mandalorian after being offered the choice by Luke back in the book of Boba Fett. The two of them land on Navarro, which has since become a bustling town of commerce, and in the background we can actually see a CR-90 Corvette, the very same model as the Tantive 4. We see a Kowakian monkey in the tree, and the same species that Jabba kept as a pet back in the Return of the Jedi. In the next shot, we see an astromech droid that looks a whole lot like R5, and it might very well be despite R5 working for Peli Motto on Tatooine, and we will see why later. On the right hand side, we also see an EV unit, the same type that Jabba used as a torture droid despite its original function as a moisture evaporator mechanic. We also then get to see Greef Karga, the administrator for this town, and in the background we see a group of aliens playing as a band. As the two shake hands, we can see in the background a statue of a droid stepping on some stormtrooper helmets. This statue here commemorates the sacrifice of IG-11 who died back in Season 1 to allow the group of heroes to escape. Mando and Grogu fly into a storm, and this might be the scene of their arrival onto Mandalore. But we are also shown in the teaser trailer that Mando would be flying a Mandalorian gauntlet to Sondari, so not too sure what the order of events are. The armorer makes a return, and we see her using her ladle to scoop out melted Beskar, likely to make more armor for the other Mandalorians. Mando also tells her that he is going to Mandalore to redeem himself, and this is part of a strict Mandalorian ritual to make amends for him revealing his face back in Season 2. As we learn in the book of Boba Fett, Mando has to journey to the mines of Mandalore, which has since been submerged underwater. But if you match the backgrounds from the scene that we saw earlier, it becomes really apparent that all of this is taking place on the same rocky, dusty planet, which likely means that the Mandalorians we see here are probably all part of the Children of the Watch, the same cult that Mando was a part of before he was expelled. This might also suggest that the fact Mando is now back among their ranks could then put these scenes as after the events on Mandalore. After Mando redeems himself, the trailer could very well be trying to mislead us here. In the next shot, we get to see an aerial view of the ruins of Sondari. Sondari was previously the capital of Mandalore, but since the Empire's purge of the Mandalorians, the entire city was carpet bombed during the Night of 1,000 Tears.
May the Force be with you!
This is the way.
We then cut to Mando back on Tatooine at Peli Motto's shop, and if you slow down the footage as Peli Motto waves Mando goodbye, you can actually see R5 sitting on Mando's ship where the astromech droid position normally is on these Naboo starfighters, which might suggest that R5 might have just become a permanent member of Mando's crew. And it's probably well deserved given that he did sacrifice himself to ensure R2 would end up in the right hands. So here R5 finally has his own chance to start an adventure all on his own after all these years. And we actually do see Mando take R5 on his trip to Mandalore as we saw in a previous shot. Mando and Grogu fly off from Tatooine with fireworks shooting behind them, and this scene is probably the aftermath to the book of Boba Fett, in which the new daimyo Tatooine manages to drive off the Pike Syndicate.
There's something dangerous happening out there, and by the time it becomes big enough for you to act, it'll be too late.
We cut to Coruscant and we hear Captain Carson Teva's warnings about an approaching danger, and we also see Dr. Pershing, the cloner who worked on Grogu back in Season 1, and his return here likely signals that the cloning plot is far from over, with potential links and ties to Palpatine's return. We then get to see Carson Teva, the Republic Ranger who has now had several encounters with Mando himself, and while it appears as though he is talking to Mando, when the camera cuts to Din, he isn't actually in the same location. In fact, the shot of Din Djarin takes place in the Mandalorian throne room, so we're still not completely sure if this is indeed Carson Teva talking to Mando. We then cut to an underground scene, and what we see here is likely the mines of Mandalore. We see Mando pick up the helmet of a long-dead Mandalorian, likely someone who didn't survive the trials. We then get to, surprisingly, see more scenes of Order 66 from Grogu's perspective, and while the Jedi's faces are obscured, we can pick out one particular Jedi who might be Sin Dralik, the legendary Jedi duelist who was killed by Anakin on that fateful night. And there is also a good chance that this might be him, as we do see Sin Dralik's iconic long hair and green lightsaber. But what is more interesting to speculate is just who exactly is coming through the door, and the entire scene here really evokes the scene from A New Hope with the rebels waiting for the Empire to cut through. So there is a very strong possibility that the person on the other side of the door just might be Anakin cutting his way through. Probably another hallway scene to add to the Star Wars collection.
Hang on, kid. This is the way.
We then see some TIE interceptors chasing a Mandalorian gauntlet with Mando supposedly driving the ship. The Mandalorian gauntlet fighter was a very common fighter used by the Mandalorians during the Clone Wars, but no clue as to why Mando might be piloting the ship instead of his modified Naboo starfighter, which might suggest that this chase scene probably takes place after the events in the mines. We then get to see a very interesting scene of a droids-only cantina, a complete opposite of the non-droid cantinas that we are normally used to. And if you pay close attention, there are a few B1 battle droids, likely leftovers from the Clone Wars period, and by this point in time might have already been reprogrammed to make their own decisions, which is why we see them here. We see a few Mandalorians drop down over Navarro, and these guys are likely part of Clan Viszla as they do wear the same colors. The Mandalorians walk through the street and we can actually see a dead Mandalorian in the background as well as the destroyed statue of IG-11, and the group appears to be led by none other than Pax Viszla. The Mandalorians kill some hired guns, and we get to see Babu Frick from The Rise of Skywalker make a return. It's not entirely certain if the Mandalorians arriving are friend or foe. In a previous teaser trailer, we do see Greef Karga standing off against some thugs, so this could very well be the Mandalorians returning to help Mando's ally. We cut back to the mines of Mandalore and we get to see Grogu moving towards Mando, who is slumped on the ground. But just as he does so, a beast cuts him off. But Grogu just force pushes him out of the way, telling us that Grogu's command of the Force has since become stronger and more stable. So that's all for the breakdown for the Mandalorian Season 3 official trailer. Did I miss anything? Let me know in the comments down below. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. I am the Lost Acolyte,
and I have spoken.